So before we begin, I wanted to read from an American Dictionary of the English Language by Noah Webster. This is volume 1, 1828. So again, we are looking at Webster's 1828 Dictionary of the English Language. Just go to AMI and we find the word American. We're going to zoom in. And it says here, American, pertaining to America, okay? American, a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals. The aboriginals, meaning people of this land, the indigenous people, right? Or copper-colored races. The copper-colored races, yes. America's the true old world. We had every phenotype here. We had every type of hair, and we had every shade of copper-colored complexion, from the lightest copper-colored complexion to the darkest copper-colored complexion. All right. So again, American, it pertains, right, originally to the aboriginals, the copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, right? Europeans. That doesn't mean white person or so-called pale skin. Remember that Europeans includes the black, so-called black Europeans that came originally too. American is applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races here found by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So now it's applied to the descendants of Europeans only, huh? They want to try to classify other people as so-called Native American and try to exclude you from being indigenous or so-called aboriginal to the land when you are copper-colored. So let's not forget what an American is. 1828 Webster's Dictionary. All right, so we're in this book now. It's called Researches, Philosophical and Antiquarian, concerning the Aboriginal History of America by J.H. McCullough, MD, and this is written in 1829. All right, and we're on page 13. We're going to read right from chapter 1 a little bit, and it's regarding on the complexion and physical appearance of the Aboriginal nations of America. All right, right away. So he starts saying, we propose in this chapter to lay before the reader some accounts of the physical characters of the Aborigines of America, such as they appeared to the first discoverers of the continent, not only in their really natural conformation, but also in those peculiarities of appearance, which from perverted ideas of beauty they either inflicted on their bodies or forced them to assume, while the system was in a growing state and susceptible of such vicious impressions. Systematic writers have also considered the native tribes of America as fifth class of the human race, under the distinct term of the copper-colored race. To this term we have much to object, not only as respects the Americans, but other nations, from whom it seems to us they have improperly separated by this theoretic distinction. In order to have a correct understanding of this subject, we should be told what is the copper color, for that metal has several different hues. So that's very important. You know, copper does have a lot of very different hues, but we know the general, like what the color is in general, right? Copper, all right, and who that resembles more, all right? So any person who inspects a large quantity of copper coin before it has been much handled may perceive 8 or 10 shades of color. All right, so it makes sense that they will call us the copper-colored races because we were many shades, not only rising to an ashen yellow, but also deepening to a darkish blue, very dark, up to the darkest hues. All right, that some of these varied tints may to a certain degree resemble the general complexion of the American Indian, I am not disposed to deny altogether. He knows it does. But if the color of copper, as usually seen in sheets or other manufacturers, is assumed as the tint, it is a variance with all the observations we have been able to make. The word applied to human complexion is ill chosen, for the mind always associates with it the idea of metallic luster, which the skin is incapable of assuming. Now, this author is trying to say that naming the whole, Americas and the whole people living there copper colored, to him is a problem because he doesn't consider it like that. Because what he's going to point out, which is what I'm going to read, is that there's other countries and other peoples, especially in the Southeast Asian islands and countries. He's about to point out there also been reference to have copper color skin. All right, so why would they have copper color skin? And like again, this is the true old world, America. All right, so are they related? Are these the same people? All right, it says Hainan Islanders on the coast of China, copper color. So this is from a book, Grosser and Winterbone's History of China. The inhabitants of Disappointment Islands, deep copper color, and that's from Hawkworth's Voyage 114. It says Malays of Timor, deep copper color, the Malays. Nicobar Islanders, copper color. Asiatic Research, Volume 3. It says Nassau or Pagi Islanders of light brown or copper color, like the Malays. All right, so he goes on. He's basically making a point. All right. All right, so after he shows those examples down here, he says the preceding quotations from Dampier, Byron Mears, and Commodore Porter, who were accustomed to the sight of American Indians, show the evident resemblance in complexion between them and the natives of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, be the color what it may, and their general resemblance to brown men of other parts of the world. Brown men, American Indians, may be directly inferred from Volney's and Humboldt's observations on this particular subject. All right, these are scholars he just quoted. And continuing the book, it says, the few Malays or Macassars that I have seen bear so general resemblance to our northern Indians that it is not easy to say in what respects they differ. All right, so now what do Malays look like? The original Malays and the Aboriginal Malays, right? This is what they look like. So, what is the difference? You tell me, all right? And America is the true old world. This is the motherland, all right? So where are they really coming from? So a little bit more down, he says, we consider, therefore, that the color of the American Indians in general is brown. In general, the color of the American Indians is brown. Who is brown? All right, we're not talking about tans here, all right? Because nobody's really black. Who's really black? The color black. All right, like crayon. Again, we therefore consider that the color of the American Indians in general is brown, differing in intensity with various tribes. Intensity, so there's more intense in some, or darkness, more darker, right? And less intense or lighter, right? According to the tribes and according to various localities. But that is almost impossible to say what that brown color principally resembles. The cinnamon, in our apprehension, the nearest approach to it, cinnamon. Again, what does cinnamon look like? And who is that? Who looks like that? Who has that complexion? Though still too inaccurate for general comparison, under these circumstances, it seems most correct simply to use the general term brown men, who will thus. So he's basically saying, I prefer to call them brown men than copper colored men. But this is what he's pointing out. But what is he really saying? Kind of saying the same thing, right? Who will thus constitute an intermediate class between the white and the Negro races. So dodge the hijack right there. Continuing, there is undoubtedly a great similarity in the appearance of the Indians of America to each other, except in a few remarkable instances. A few, all right? Few. To be noticed in their proper place, yet there are also various shades of difference among them, showing the impossibility of reducing them all under one general class of complexion. Though their color is commonly assumed to be that of copper, we find travelers constantly remarking the variations of hue among different tribes, as for instance. All right, so we're just going to show a couple of examples of what he's talking about, right? So it says the Indians near the source of the Peace River are of a swarthy yellow complexion. Swarthy means dark. So dark yellow complexion. Mackenzie's Voyage, 195. All right. The Cherokees are a lighter color than adjacent Indians. Barton's New Views. Depends on what years, right? The Mandans and Gros Ventres have a light complexion and hair inclining to chestnut. All right, so this is from description of Ohio 152. Now, I have images of Gros Ventre. I'm going to show you, and we have shown you, that are, they look very dark. They don't look light at all. But, again, same tribes had different, complexions. The complexion of the Quapas, like that of the Choctaws and Creeks, is dark. Again, the complexion of the Quapas, like that of the Choctaws and Creeks, is dark and destitute of anything like the croupious hinge. Nuttall's Travels, page 83. The Mexican complexion, according to Clavijero, is olive. History of Mexico, Volume 1.
Herrera, Volume 11 says, the women of the Chiachiapollos of Peru were so much whiter and more graceful than other Indians that they were sought after by the Incas, all right? So they were of a lighter complexion. These specific women from this specific tribe in Peru.
It says here, Baron Humboldt remarks, if the uniform tint of the skin be more coppery and redder toward the north, it is on the contrary among the Chaimas of the deep brown, inclining to tawny. The denomination of copper-colored men, Rogis, could never have originated in equinoctial America to designate the natives. So he's saying that in South America, they're actually more brown than copper. Right? They're more copper towards the North America. That's what Humboldt's opinion is. All right. It says description of the Orinoco by Gumila, Volume 1, page 107. The color of the Indians on the borders of the Orinoco is so diversified that he could not say nothing of it under one general head. But we know the Orinoco, especially that whole area, the Amazon, Suriname, French Guyana, that's so many Swarthy, as they will call it, or dark skin or so-called black tribes. All right, but they also did have light tribes in those areas too. That's why they're saying they're so diversified there. All right, we didn't just have one color over here. The Guaicurus of Brazil are of a darker tint than copper. Darker than copper? The Guaicurus of Brazil. This is in Southeast History of Brazil, Volume 3, page 671. Go do the research and verify all this if you want. I already did. Continuing on the next page, it says the Charruas are more black than white. Again, the Charruas are more so-called black than white, without any mixture of red or copper or coppery or the ruddy reddish skin. They're actually more black. The Guayanas, a different people from the Guaranis of Brazil and Paraguay, differ from all Indians of those nations by the lightness of their color, and some of them have blue eyes. All right, so that's interesting, taking account to what they're saying. Again, if you really go into these books, they'll tell you straight up, but they have no European mixture. All right, so they knew it was just part of what they found here, different types of complexions and people. Remember, this is the true old world. Where did all this stuff originate? Now, this author goes on to quote other unknown tribes or descriptions that we may not have known, but I mean, they show us these images all the time. So he does verify there was tribes that looked almost like Europeans or very light like Europeans. These are from the same Europeans saying that, but they know they weren't just like them. They would just say fair complexion. All right, let me just give you an example. It says, Captain Cook observes we could never positively determine their color at Nootka, they being encrusted with paint and dirt, though in particular cases when these were rubbed off, the whiteness of the skin appeared almost to equal that of the Europeans. All right, so remember, these are different regions. There's like Siberia, almost in Alaska, and different regions in South America. Even in Central America, there was a lot of light-skinned tribes all over the place. All right, but we already know that because that's the image they always gave us, right? So what I want to show you in the same book is going to tell us the ones that we never hear about. All right, so let's get to that part. So he says, though America possesses some dark brown men approaching to black, yet it has been almost universally believed that there were no aboriginal blacks or Negroes found on this continent. All right, so that's the hijack that we grew up with, right? But from considering the peculiar circumstances under which a black race was found in North America, I hold it more than probable that the common opinion is erroneous. Torquemada says the Californians showed no manner of surprise at the sight of some Negroes that accompanied Vizcaino on a voyage to this coast in 1602. As I have never seen Torquemada's Monarchia Indiana, I can only quote from Venegas, California, volume 2, 239, who says from Torquemada that when a Negro was ordered to distribute some biscuits to Californians at the Bay of St. Barnabas, the natives seemed greatly pleased at the sight of the Negro and signified to him that they lived in friendship with correspondence with the people of his color, and that not far from thence was a Negro village. Again, a Negro village. All right, this is an historic book. Torquemada undertakes to explain this remarkable circumstance by supposing that Negroes had been left there by some ship from the Philippine Islands. But as he does not quote the time when such an event had occurred, we presume it was a mere conjecture of his own to explain an anomaly of which he had been previously ignorant, because he didn't know. They don't know. They didn't know. And at first we were disposed to think the supposition plausible. But as it was found on extending our researches, again, now pay attention to what he's saying, it was a possible theory that maybe there was no Aboriginals, blacks, as they call them here in America to him, this author. But after extending his research, right, that the Negro character of the Indians on this coast has been distinctly remarked by various navigators. It's all over the historic records. They found you when they came here and they wrote it down. And I've been showing you this, especially in my other series, from Indigenous American to African American. Showed you a lot of references, books, different navigators, as he calls them, letting you know who was here. All right. Even of the present day, we deem it impossible that any few individuals who were probably without women with them when left on this coast could have been able to communicate their peculiar complexion and features to entire nations, even after a period of above 200 years. The subject is still in obscurity and belongs to the terra incognita of America, laying between the rivers Columbia and Gila. The authorities I have been able to examine respecting the present Negro appearance of the Indians in that region are as follows. All right, so pay close attention. The color of the Indians of the Californians mission, seen by La Peyrouse, Voyage, Volume 2, 197 and page 212, very nearly approaches that of the Negroes, whose hair is not woolly, and in another place the color of these Indians, which is that of Negroes. Landdorf, who visited St. Francisco on the coast of California, confirms the observations of La Peyrouse, for he says in Voyage, page 440, the Indians there are of a very dark complexion, very dark complexion, approaching to black, so-called black, so-called Negro. Do you remember who you are? They're talking about you. They have large projecting lips, broad flat Negro-like noses. Indeed, many of their features, as well as their physiognomy and almost their color, bear strong resemblance to the Negroes. Their hair, however, is long and straight. Again, this is the true old world. We got all types of hairs, all types of complexions, all types of phenotypes. The original people are from here. From the plates and chorus voyages, of which I had but a slight examination, they appear to resemble very nearly the blacks of Hindostan, or India. Hindostan, that's what it was called, of whom a few Marathas only have fallen under my personal observation. But it is well known that many of the Hindu race are only distinguished by straightness of hair from the Africans, for they are not less black. They are not less black. This circumstance has been noticed by Strabo as the distinction between two races, as we cannot admit for a moment that these American blacks were ever driven by stress of weather across the Pacific Ocean to California, unless it be proved they are the descendants of Negroes left by the Spaniards. It will follow of necessity that they have been settled in America from the earliest ages. All right, so he's saying if you can't prove that they were shipwrecked from the Pacific Ocean, or had to migrate over here from there, or that they are descendants from Negroes or so-called Negroes, which are just other Indians, right? left by the Spaniards, then these are people or Americans that have been here from the earliest ages, and I would say from creation. In another part of America, if reliance can be placed upon the correctness of the relation, a race of blacks were seen at so early a period of our history that it seems impossible to avoid the conclusion that they were aboriginal. Okay? Peter Martyr, we got this right already? Decade page 97, and describing the journey of Balboa across the Isthmus of Darien, that's in Panama, AD 1511, gives the following history. All right, and we quote Peter Martyr. There is a region not above 2 days' journey from Quarequa, in which they found only blackamoors, and those exceeding fierce and cruel. The circumstance of finding them there, he attempted to explain by the conjecture that they were Ethiopians who had crossed the Atlantic to rob the country, and that after having been shipwrecked, they had been compelled by the natives to take refuge in the mountains. All right, so what is an Ethiopian? It's not a specific person in a specific country, especially in these times. This is in reference, again, the etymology of Ethiopia, burnt face. These are in reference to people of dark skin. All right, an Ethiopian. All right. But all this is pure guesswork, which we shall not attempt to disprove. All right. He's letting you know that that whole thing that it was Ethiopians that came from Africa over here. No, that's again guesswork. And he's not gonna even try to disprove that because it's not even real. For it is not more plausible than the supposition that they were aboriginal. You understand? So it's actually farther. It's more extreme to say they came from somewhere else and then they shipwrecked. And I mean, that's the story. Come on. What about the rest of the places in Americas? Did all these nations and tribes all shipwrecked? Huh? So he's saying, so if you're gonna believe that, then why wouldn't you believe the fact that they could be aboriginal? All right. It is only interesting to us to inquire whether that the fact really be as represented by the historian of Balboa, or whether he may not have been deceived by some external filth or paint, whereby these people were remarkable from other Indians. On this subject, I have nothing to produce, as no other account of this particular part of America that I know of mentions the circumstance which perhaps has arisen from the belief that these blacks were descendants of the runaway Negroes, which the infamous slave trade had brought to tropical America at a very early period. All right, so we dodged the hijack. We've debunked that. We know the Spanish and Portuguese were enslaving American Indians. All right, these were the people they were replenishing the islands, the plantations with, the colonies. American Indians, they were calling them Negroes. Remember, Negroes, the word was synonymous with slave at one point. All right. Now the author continues. All right. If I am not much mistaken, however, we shall be able to show that the relation of Peter Martyr concerning the blackamoors, as he called them, again, seen by Balboa, was substantially correct. So he was correct in calling them black or dark skinned. For we learn from Stevenson, Travels in South America, Volume 2, in 387, the following singular facts, which we shall quote at length. Again, we're going to quote this guy. All right. The natives of Esmeralda, Rio Verde, and Atacames in the Republic of Colombia are all Sambos, apparently a mixture of Negroes and Indians. So what does that mean? You know, dodge the hijack. Indeed, the oral tradition of their origin is that a ship having Negroes on board arrived on the coast, and that having landed, they murdered a great number of the male Indians, kept their widows and daughters, and laid the foundation of the present race. Now, it's funny because when you start doing a lot of these research of how they try to say so-called Negroes got to these places in these Spanish countries, you're always going to see a pattern. Most of the time, you're going to see a shipwreck. I mean, I can do a video about it. Trust me. They just saying, making up things, talking about shipwrecks, all bunch of shipwrecks. If this were the case, and it is not very improbable, the whole of the surrounding country being peopled with Indians, it produces a striking instance of the facility with which an apparently different tribe of human beings is produced. For the present, Esmeraldenos are very different in their features, hair, color, and shape to the Chino, or offspring of a Negro or Indian. So they were calling offsprings of Negroes and Indians Chino. I thought Chino meant Chinese. These are commonly short and lusty, and of a very deep copper color. Thick hair, neither lank nor curled, small eyes, sharpest nose, and well-shaped mouth, whereas the Esmeraldenos are tall and rather slender, of a lightish black color, different from that called copper color, have soft curly hair, large eyes, nose rather flat, and thick lips, possessing more of the Negro than of the Indian. All right, so dodge the hijack. The language of the Esmeraldenos is also entirely different from the Quichua, which is the general language of the Indians. It is rather nasal and appears very scanty of words. It is very singular that so intelligent a writer as Stevenson could listen to the story that the black natives of Atacames could have descended from a shipload of Negroes who had in some immemorial time arrived on this coast. For every word of comment or explanation that he has made is in direct opposition to such an hypothesis. And if the offspring of a Negro and Indian be entirely different from the natives of the Atacames, Esmeraldos, by what imaginable rule can we refer to the origin of these people to such progenitors? The whole legend is ridiculous. Again, this whole stories of Negroes from Africa, slaves being shipwrecked, is ridiculous and has been no doubt a Spanish or Indian suggestion to explain the singularity of the fact concerning which they had no other method of explication. All right? They were making up things. I know not whether the population to the northward partake of this black complexion of the Atacames, but these last are now about 400 miles from Quarecua, where Balboa is reported to have seen a similar complexion. So, I find it interesting that I found a book from 1829 where the author is actually questioning his indoctrination, the whole out of Africa theory, right? Because he's seeing so much records, he's seeing himself, from seeing the Indians himself, that there's a possibility that these are aboriginals. All right, that's what he basically was kind of getting at. So I thought that was very interesting. There's some more descriptions he has here. I just want to read this one. It says Juaro's History of Guatemala, 346, in describing the complexion of the peoples of that province, which almost terminates in the country visited by Balboa, says expressly that some of the Indians there are white, others black, and others red or copper colored, and seemingly considers them original nations by this enumeration. All right, original. They're still original. All right, for he makes no observation on these peculiarities of complexion. It says here, there's another circumstance connected with the history of blacks in this part of the world, which it may be proper to introduce in this place, be it worth what it may. The people of Hispaniola informed Columbus. This is from Herrera, Antonio Herrera, and we have that book in Spanish, volume 1, page 374, that there was to the south and southeast a black people who pointed the heads of their javelins with metal. It is not easy to imagine the natives of Santo Domingo had any acquaintance with the people of the Isthmus, or even of those of Guatemala, though it is not impossible. If this could be deemed probable, there will be little difficulty in considering the fact well established that there were blacks in these parts of the continent who had extended themselves both north and south of the Isthmus of Darien.
Now we're going to talk about also like the piercings and body modifications or anything they did to the ears or nostrils or anything like that. Tribally, it's going to start referring to those accounts throughout both North and South America. The natives, with few exceptions, prick black or blue figures into their skins, a custom that has prevailed among almost every rude nation in the world, and in such numerous instances that it is not worthwhile to quote authorities. Very generally, in North America and also in Peru and Brazil, the natives cut the outer edge of the ear loose, to which they attach such a variety and weight of ornaments as sometimes literally to stretch this partially detached portion down to the shoulder. They also perforated the cartilage of the nose, in which they wore rings, reeds, stones, feathers, all right, even feathers. Many nations of the eastern continent disfigured themselves in like manner. The natives of the Fiji Islands and those of Bali adjoining Java stretched their ears in like manners to an enormous degree, all right? So very similar like the American Indians. Many tribes flattened the foreheads by artificial compression. They laid the young infant on its back with the head in a hole made to receive it and then applied a small bag of sand or other weight on the frontal bone until it more or less assumed the desired flatness. Sometimes they accomplished the purpose by binding two flat boards tight on the head. This custom prevails among the nations of the western slope of the Rocky Mountains and was once remarkable among the Choctaws and also the Caribs of the West India Islands. Some Peruvian and Brazilian tribes also adopted this preposterous fashion. The Arawaks, who inhabited the larger West India Islands at the time of the discovery of Columbus, flattened the head downward in the direction of the spine. They appear to have been alone in this practice according to our inquiries. The natives of Asia and of the Indian islands in certain instances compressed the forehead like the Caribs. This was done by the people of Arakan in the Burma Empire and several islanders of the Indian archipelago. The Caribs bound strong ligatures round the legs of their children that they might enlarge the calf and raise the flesh in ridges from the ankles to the top of the thighs. All right, you hear all these body modifications. This practice was observed by Columbus on his first voyage. It is also mentioned by Gumilla as practiced by that people in his time. All right, so they're going over all the primary sources. They're getting all this information. You guys see in the parentheses. Many of the Brazilian tribes cut holes in their cheeks and noses in which they inserted colored stones, pieces of wood, and feathers. But the most extraordinary perversion of nature was practiced among those nations who attempted to exhibit either two mouths or else inserted in the transverse slit that made this second mouth a piece of wood carved like the bowl of a soup spoon, which projected out with the cavity upwards as if to catch what might drop down whilst eating. This disgusting ornament was much used, especially by women on the northwest coast, Sea Cook, Vancouver, Perouse, and Dixon. The same custom prevailed in great measure throughout the Brazilian nations. It was observed on the seacoast by Cabral, who describes the natives as having one lower lip cut like a second mouth and wearing a stone in it, or piece of wood, which in some instances hung down like a tongue. Some Indians near Buenos Aires, according to Gumilla, cut the mouth from ear to ear. Dampier describes the natives of the Pearl Islands, Marguerite Island, right? Remember that from the Pearl videos? This is what he's talking about, the people who were expert divers, and they were referring to them as so-called Negroes. Wearing a piece of tortoise shell passed through the lower lip by a round hole, and which hung over the chin like a beard. Cortes described the grandees of Sempoayang with their underlips hanging on their chins from the weight of ornaments thereto appended. The Mixtecas used the same disfigurement, and the Mexicans adorned some of their divinities after this fashion. Cabeza de Vaca observed the Floridian Indians to have holes in the underlip through which they thrust pieces of reed. I have met with no instances of any other than Americans thus slitting or boring the lower lip. All right, Americans mainly doing this, except the one mentioned by Major Denham in the relation of his journey to Central Africa. All right, so he's saying it's actually more prevalent here than in Africa, something that's practiced over there. All right, and this part, there's one part he said, this one case he's pointing out right here. He observes that the musk-grow women wear a silver stud in the lower lip, which not only causes the loss of the two under front teeth, but drags the lip down on the chin and gives a frightful and disgusting appearance to the face. In general, the American Indians did not interfere with nature by disfiguring their teeth. The few instances we have observed of such a practice are as follows. Herrera relates, the women of Yucatan formerly used to saw their teeth. Some of the natives of Peru, like the natives of New Holland and the Sandwich Islands, knocked out their front teeth. Sarate says some of the Indians near the island of Puna extracted all the teeth of their upper jaw, but this certainly must be a mistake, though founded probably in a careless observance of a practice, like the one mentioned by Garcilaso, as above quoted. Our researches on the physical history of the Aborigines of America have not enabled us to add anything to the physiological history of man, though we have admitted that climate and states of civilization might occasion some partial modifications, yet neither as respects their stature, physiognomy, or complexion. Pay attention, he's telling you that weather, climate, and wherever they live in has nothing to do in general to, their height, the physiognomy, or their complexion. Okay? Have we been able to discover any common principles by which we can explain the diversities that exist in the human family? The discovery certainly of a white race, and probably of one that is black in America, probably so-called black, adjacent to each other and surrounded by brown men on all sides, brown men in general, becomes irreconcilable with any theory that supposes that these different complexions to be consequent on physical causes. It's not specific to climate. And when we connect these American anomalies with the existence of brown men in Africa and black men in the islands of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, who yet live under the same solar influence and with similar uncivilized institutions, we feel more and more reluctant to admit that these diversities have originated from partial causes. Men, divided into white, brown, and black, have existed from the earliest times of history, and they have, at least to our knowledge, continued in those relative states without ever departing from their established characters. The observation of Humboldt, it would seem, is absolutely correct, who remarks that notwithstanding the variety of climates and elevations inhabited by the different races of men, nature never deviates from the models of which she made selection thousands of years ago. All right, that's Humboldt letting you know. All right, has nothing to do with climate. All right, so that's the end of this chapter. We read, skimmed through some of the main points. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks for taking the time to read this with me and see some historical sources, how they were describing the American Indians, what they look like.
All right, so now we're in this other website. It's the American Philosophical Society Library Digital Collections, and it says that it's two Tepecano women in native attire. All right, these are the Tepecano American Indians, Aboriginals. You see, Tepecano. You see them? You see, so everybody thinks that everybody like past the Mississippi or something is like supposed to be like Mongol or look a certain way, all right? Or that Indians down in the Southwest or in Mexico is supposed to look a certain way, but these are Tepecano, 100% pure blood, all right? We're in the digital library, collections, all right? Native attire. Let's see the description. It says black and white photograph of two Tepecano women in native attire standing in front of a straw and stone dwelling in Jalisco, Mexico. All right, in Jalisco, Mexico. Creator John Alden Mason. All right, two Tepecano women. All right. You see that? Again, these two will be considered so-called African American today. Do they show you Mexicans or Indians like this? Huh? All right, so now we're in this other book. It's called In the Land of Cave and Cliff Dwellers by Lieutenant Frederick Schwatka. Again, in the land of cave and cliff dwellers. All right, so this was an expedition that was done by this guy, Frederick Schwatka, in the 1800s. And again, this is in the Bureau of Ethnology Library. So we're on page 183, and it's in reference to the Tarahumari Indians, all right? And it says here, in appearance, the Tarahumari savage is, I think, a little above the average height of our own Indians in the Southwest. They are well built and very muscular, while the skin of the cave and cliff dweller is of the darkest hue of any American native I've ever seen, being almost a mixture of the Guinea Negro, with the average copper-colored aborigine that we are so accustomed to see in the western parts of the United States. Again, the Tarahumari. All right. So he's saying the Tarahumari are a mixture of the Guinea Negro, the West African, right, with the average copper-colored aborigine. All right. So in between. All right, those shades. But again, we have all the shades, right? That's why it's called the copper-colored races, right?
And for the dismount, before we leave today, just a quick reminder of some other historical writings here. Says here, the Lake Charles Atacapas, and they call them cannibals. This is the name of the book, period of 1817 to 1820, written by request for the Howard Memorial Library in New Orleans by Dr. J.O. Dyer from Galveston, Texas. Now, in regards to the Atacapas, he says here the savages who were the coastal clan of interior tribes were of a very low type of civilization. I dodged the hijack. They were dark skinned, with dirty, short, coarse, black, matted hair, and they were dark skinned, okay? Their bodies stout, stature short, and heads of a large size placed almost between the shoulders. The ears were very large, as were the mouths, and the cheekbones and nose prominent. Colonel Graham thought they resembled the Orcoquisas, all right? So that's his description of them. There's another description over here to the right in the bottom. It says, the tribe how likened to the type of the Tonkahuas, men of short stature, large heads, dark skins. So the Tonkahuas also dark skins and prominent facial features of an unpleasant cast, especially noticeable were the high cheekbones and protruding lips. So I want to show you guys these references again. The Atacapas, Louisiana, Texas, they were dark skinned with coarse black matted hair, and this is a historical drawing here. If you Google Atacapa, you'll get a Wikipedia page, and you'll see this very same drawing in black and white. Atlantic Journal and Friends of Knowledge, Cyclopedic Journal and Review of Universal Science and Knowledge, Historical, Natural, Medical, Arts and Sciences, with numerous figures by editor C.S. Rafinsky, professor of Historical and Natural Sciences. Knowledge is the mental food of man, okay? The Americans cannot have sprung from a single nation because, independently of the languages, their features and complexions are as various as in Africa and Asia, okay? Their complexions vary, just like in Africa, Talking about Americans. We find in America white, so-called white, tawny, brown, yellow, olive, copper, and even so-called black nations, just like in Africa. Also dwarfs, short people, and giants, very tall people, handsome and ugly features, flat and aquiline noses, thick and thin lips. All right? All kinds of people here. America, the true old world. The Facts on File, Encyclopedia of Word and Phrase Origins, 4th edition. All right? It says here, the N word. The N word has also been offensive derogatory term applied to Indians as well as so-called blacks up until recent times. All right? Also applied to Indians. The History of Signboards from the Earliest Times to the Present Day by Jacob Larwood and John Camden Houghton. Blackamoors and other dark-skinned foreigners have always possessed considerable attractions as signs for tobacconists and sometimes also for public houses. Negroes with feathered headdresses and quilts, smoking pipes, are to be seen outside tobacco shops on the continent as well as in England. Thus, in the 17th century, there was one in Amsterdam with the following inscription. All right, so we don't get that. Got to get the book, but you guys already know what they're talking about, who they talking about. Man, a monthly record of anthropological science published under the direction of the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. This is from April 1939. Physical anthropology says here Negro skeletal remains from Indian sites in the West Indies. The recent paper in the journal by Buxton, Trevor, and Julian implies that an undeformed Negroid physical type inhabited the Virgin Islands in pre-Columbian times. Okay, they found the skull to prove it. Pre-Columbian, they were here before Columbus. This is what they're finding. Again, these people are indigenous to the Americas. A little ahead in the article, after doing some of the research, Mr. Shilson believed this skeleton to be that of an Arawak Indian, and in 1937 presented it as such to the U.S. National Museum. He said, hey, look, I found this Arawak Indian, and look, upon reconstructing the skull from the many fragments in which it was received in Washington, I felt justified in calling it a Negro for reasons that will appear from the following description, right? So he explains why, but again, he says an Arawak Indian. North American Indians, being letters and notes on their manners, customs, and conditions written during the 8-year travel amongst the wildest tribes of Indians in North America. This is by George Catlin, Volume 1. And it says here, the reader will at once see by the above facts that there is enough upon the faces and heads of these people to stamp them peculiar when he meets them in the heart of this almost boundless wilderness, presenting such diversities of color, so diverse of color, come on, in the complexion and hair, diversities of color. You got to kill all your prejudices. When he knows from what he has seen and what he has read, that all other primitive tribes known in America are dark copper colored with jet black hair. Again, dark copper colored. Verrazano's voyage along the Atlantic coast of North America, 1524, reprinted from the annual report of the state historian. This is from 1916. And Verrazano clearly described when he saw the Indians he encountered, when they're calling Florida, could be the southeast, anywhere there. There's somewhere certain garlands of feathers of birds. They are of dark color, not much unlike Ethiopians. That doesn't mean they are, this means unlike, meaning they are dark skinned like Ethiopians, and hair black and thick. Thick, not very long, which they tie together back on their head in the shape of a little tail. Okay? As for the symmetry of the man, they are well proportioned, of medium stature, and rather exceed us, right? Taller than the Spaniards. In the breast, they are broad, their arms well built, the legs and other parts of the body well put together. There is nothing else except that they incline somewhat to broadness in the face, but not all, for in more we saw the face clear cut. That's what Verrazano is saying about the Indians he's encountering. Dark color, not much unlike the Ethiopians. A letter from William Penn, proprietor and governor of Pennsylvania in America, to the Committee of the Free Society of Traders. All right, this is from the 1600s. And William Penn, yes, the founder of Pennsylvania, or the person that named the state after, he says, the natives I shall consider in their persons, language, manners, religion, and government, with my sense of their original. For their persons, they are generally tall, straight, well built, and of singular proportion. They thread strong and clever, and mostly walk with a lofty chin, okay? Of complexion, black, but by design as the gypsies in England, just like the gypsies, remember, the gypsies original, so-called black too, dark skin. They grease themselves with bear's fat clarified, and using no defense against the sun or weather, their skins must need be swarthy. Yeah, because they don't wear protection, they need to be swarthy, and they are so-called black as he's describing them, all right? This is William Penn's account of the Indians he's encountering in his area. Down at the bottom, he says their language is lofty, yet narrow, but like the Hebrew. Like the Hebrew. Do you remember who you are?